Hi guys, Jackie Anderson here with Kula Talks. Today I want to talk about kind of the misconception of what yoga is and what yoga isn't. And there's a book called the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, and it's basically the yoga Bible. And it gives all of the tools to practice yoga. So let me be really clear what yoga is. So yoga isn't moving your body in calisthenics. Yoga is not coming to your mat and exercising. Yoga isn't holding poses. What yoga is, and the definition of yoga or the practice of yoga, is simply to quiet the mind, to slow down the fluctuations of the thoughts. So I don't know if you guys are aware of this or not, but we have these thoughts and they become patterns, they become habits, they become the way we are, how we respond to life. And I don't remember quite what age I was when I realized that I actually had control over the stuff going on in my brain. And one of the biggest addictions every single person on this planet has, every single one, there's no exception, is where their mind dwells. We spend most of our day caught up in here, analyzing, going back in the past, wishing we did things different, projecting, anticipating the future. And so let me be real clear. When we are constantly in the future and we're projecting and we're planning, there is an element of anxiety that goes with that. It just is what it is. Future thinkers, which I am, tend to have more anxiety. People that spend more time in the past, reflecting, going over, reviewing, maybe there's regret, maybe there's not, maybe you're proud of but regardless, you're spending time repeating experiences that already happened. Those types of people tend to be more on the depressed side. So we have both emotions, and then we have our center and our core, and that's where the stillness is. It's when we get out of these thoughts, out of our brain. And so if the biggest addiction is where our mind dwells, one would say that yoga is needed from every single person on the planet, not to come physically move your body, but to learn how to navigate and control the thoughts in our mind. And then more so, learning to observe the emotions, these big emotions that we experience throughout our day, throughout our life, throughout our journey, and be able to observe them without the reactiveness, without coming at somebody and projecting the way that we feel within onto other people. Most of our actions are projections of how we feel inside. Now, I watch this with my kids. I watch when my daughter is feeling left out, being the middle child, and she's feeling a certain way, and we're trying to learn how to identify that feeling and then find a tool for that, right? So when I see that she's acting out or she's trying to get attention, I usually pull her aside. I ask her how she's feeling. Now, if I don't meet that need, she starts projecting that feeling onto her brother. She starts hitting, she starts taking toys. She'll take his food and eat a bite and then give her hers. Like, she's constantly trying to navigate to be the center of attention. And oddly, she is the center of attention because she needs a lot of attention being the middle child. Whole nother podcast on that. But, I'm observing it in my children who haven't really learned anything about life or how to respond to emotions. We're still learning how to identify our emotions. Now, this happens with adults. When you're mad, when you're feeling sad, when you're feeling abandoned, when you're feeling any sort of feeling, a lot of times the person closest to us, we dump on, we project on. My 12-year-old, I am her punching bag. And I'm trying to teach all of my children that just because you're feeling something that is off, I am not the person you're going to dump on. Let's acknowledge first, let's acknowledge what that emotion is. And then two, how can we meet ourselves where we're at with love, with compassion, with grace? Maybe that means taking a walk outside. Maybe that means going in our room, shutting the door and taking 5 breaths. Maybe it means journaling. And so everybody's different. So the practice of yoga has helped me become my best self, my best version of myself. Yes, I default. Yes, I fall back into old patterns and old habits. We all do. It's part of life. It's called ebbs and flow. But the practice of yoga, being able to slow the fluctuations of our mind, slow the emotional state, and learn to observe and become the seer, has helped me become a more patient mom. Now, do I yell? Do I scream? Do I lose my patience? Yes. My 5-year-old yesterday told me, Mom, if you don't learn patience, how are we going to learn patience? She's constantly coming at me with these one-liners, super intuitive, super smart. So the practice of yoga is to, I have to get my coffee fix, is to slow the fluctuations of the mind. So how do we do that? The best and only way, not only, but the best and most effective way is to focus on our breath, because we also, as a collective consciousness, breathe very shallow, which I've talked about on some of the other podcasts. When we're breathing in our chest, we're prone to have more anxiety. We're prone to be uprooted, less grounded. When we get into that belly breath, those deep inhales, those slow exhales, we start to regulate our nervous system. And so our flight or fright response, now if you think back in the old days, flight or fright response was only triggered when you were being chased by, say, a lion, like the hunters and gatherers are out there trying to find a big piece of meat so they can feed a village for over a month. They weren't eating meat, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You know, they were eating it based on nutrition, and I'm getting all over the place. However, that is when our flight or fright response system would flare up. Nowadays, we live in our flight or fright response. So that is our sympathetic nervous system. It's our stress response. It's our anxiousness, our anxiety, our constantly going, doing. And more so, it's the amount of energy we allow into our life. Our TV is energy. The radio is energy. Social media is energy. This video is energy. The people around us is energy. And so we're consuming energy, AKA, and information on levels that we've never seen in the history of human beings. And so if we're not cautious or we're not aware of it, this can overtake our life, and we can feel constantly like we're crawling out of our skin, constantly in that flight or fright response, which does all sorts of things to the body. Cortisol levels spike, and it can create lots of stuff. Again, another podcast. So how do we negate that? For me, it's yoga. It's breathing. It's being aware of where my mind is dwelling and the thoughts that I am allowing to spiral, right? So one universal truth that abides to everything on this planet is what you feed grows, and what you ignore or starve dies. This goes to human beings. It goes to plants, it goes to animals, but it also goes to your thoughts. So the thoughts that you feed, the thoughts that you allow to go over and over and over again. See, the thing is, as soon as we're aware of it, we have a choice. That is called enlightenment, to turn the light on. We become aware of what is spiraling in our mind, and we have a choice. So that choice looks like this. The person who bites their nail, it's subconscious. They don't know they're doing it, but they really want to stop biting their nails. So they put hot sauce on their nails, and then they go to bite their nails, and they're like, oh shit, enlightenment. That's the moment the light has been turned on, and now you have a conscious choice. You can choose to wipe the hot sauce off and continue biting the nails and continue that habit, that pattern, or you can wipe it off and choose to not bite your nails. Now, this is a very generic, basic example, but this goes to anything in life. So when we become aware of where our mind is dwelling, we now have conscious choice. We have the freedom to make our own decisions and be less reactive and more responsive. And so when we respond our way through life, we're moving with intention, we're grounding our energy, we're taking deep breaths, and we're tapping into our higher self instead of our reactive self. And so if the practice of yoga is to quiet the mind, right? The tool to quiet our mind is our breath. As we breathe in and out, you cannot breathe deeply into your belly without thinking about it. The moment you stop thinking about your breath, you return to your natural atomic breath respiratory system, and you're probably back into your thoughts. Now, this is a dance. Every time your mind pulls you out, make that decision to come back. And you know, I resisted this a lot in the beginning because I was like, just being still and having no thoughts is doing nothing. I don't have time in my day to do nothing. And it took me growth and age to realize that doing nothing is one of the best things I can do for my nervous system, my brain, for my cardiovascular system, my heart, and it sets the tone for the rest of the day. I am in control and I am in charge. I am going to feed what serves me and I'm going to ignore what no longer serves me. Now, how many of us have negative self-talk? A lot of us throughout our day. And that's one of the first things that my students learn is pay attention to how you're speaking to yourself throughout your practice and in this pose. And if it's negative, immediately become aware of it, turn the light on, become enlightened, and change it. I'm a badass. I'm here. I'm showing up. I'm doing the best that I can. I am just as good as the person next to me. And so if the practice of yoga is to quiet the mind, what is the meaning of yoga? So the word yoga is actually a Sanskrit word, which is an ancient language that really is no longer seen except for really in India and in your like yogic philosophy. But the word yoga means to harness. Now, a harness is something back in the day that would go on like an ox for you to steer the herd to where you want it to go. So in essence, yoga means to harness or to steer. A lot of us say it's to yoke, right? Let me correct that. So the word yoga means to harness, but it also means to yoke. Y-O-L-K, right? So if the word yoga means to yoke, Y-O-K-E, it's not to yoke like an egg yolk. A lot of people say it's to yoke the body, mind, and spirit. And that's not what the meaning is. That's a benefit of the practice is we do become in alignment. We become centered and connected body, mind, and spirit. But the word yoga means to yoke, Y-O-K-E. And a yoke back in the day was like a harness that went on, say, ox or cattle to steer the herd. So yoga, to yoke, to harness, to steer our way through life, to make conscious decisions as we walk our path instead of responding and reacting, or not responding, but instead of reacting to every little emotion that we have. We learn to become this pillar of strength through stillness, despite the emotional kind of chaos that comes up in our mind and how we evaluate and judge and observe different situations within ourselves and within others. So the practice of yoga is to quiet the mind. The word yoga means to steer, to harness. So we're steering and harnessing our life by quieting the mind and observing without getting so caught up. So then we come into our yoga mat and people make yoga shit because they bring their shit into yoga and then their yoga becomes shit. What do I mean by that? So they bring in their competitiveness, they bring in their comparing, they bring in their negative self-talk. You know, for me, one of the first lessons that I learned, and it was in chair pose in one of my sister's classes, and I started to get extremely angry. And then my first reaction was to blame the teacher. And so I started to feel this sense of anger, which there was maybe another feeling underneath that. They say anger masks other feelings. And that feeling was that I didn't love myself. I didn't feel worthy. I felt like I've always felt like I've had to dim my light and just quiet my energy and just become this little like dim of light when I feel expansive. And so I was in class, I was pretty upset, I was mad, and I get into, my car and I realized I just brought my shit into yoga and I made the whole practice shit. I was angry and I was projecting. So instead of becoming aware of that and changing it, I just kept spiraling into it until that moment. And that was when the light was turned on and I started to practice and work through where this anger was coming from, where this negative self-talk was coming from. And I started to shift. And so this continues on the practice. Stuff always comes up. And as we learn who we are through quieting the mind and less involved in the outside world, more involved in the inside world, I began to shift. I began to change. And I began to tap into all of these beautiful qualities that exist within all of us. So one thing to understand when we start practicing yoga is there's nothing to fix. You're not broken. You're not wrong. We are all whole, we are all complete as we are right now, but sometimes these masks and these roles and these facades and other people's opinions or fear of judgment of other people starts to create some malevolent qualities. And as we navigate and get older, we can be aware of those and start to replace them with benevolent, grace, love, acceptance, forgiveness. And so this is really where I fell in love with yoga. Yes, I love the physical practice. Yes, I love moving my body. I like getting my butt strong. You know, whatever it is, whatever Instagram has done to yoga, that is a benefit. But the working is within. And to be honest with you, yogis want you to be ugly. We don't have mirrors in my studios for a very specific reason. We need to disconnect from what we look like, this appearance on the outside, and we need to connect with what's in. That's what's sustainable. Our body is limited. We know that, right? As we age, that's one of the biggest lessons for most people is aging and being okay with it. Our mind, they don't know the limitations. The mind is expansive. Consciousness might be eternal. So if we're so caught up and attached to this physical dimension of us, we're going to have a really hard time when it comes time to the end. Right? So Buddha says, the more attached you are to anything, the more suffering you will endure. So we're attached to the way we look. We're attached to how we looked when we were 20. We're attached to the wrinkle on our face. We're attached to our gray hair. We're attached to losing our hair. We're attached to all of these roles and masks, which are not eternal, right? They shift, they change. And so if we're attached to that, and the only constant on the world is change, evolution, we're going to be doing a lot of suffering. And, you know, we all have to let go. We have to practice letting go. We have to practice throughout our life being less attached to whatever it is. And it comes in layers and it's a progression. But if we've never practiced letting go, can you imagine how scary the end of our life will be? Because every single one of us is going to say goodbye to everything we know on this planet. And if we haven't turned inward and we haven't found our best friend within ourselves, it can feel lonely. It can feel separate and isolated. And so that's the beauty of yoga, is it's way beyond the physical practice. And actually, each pose in your yoga class, it ends with the word asana. It's a Sanskrit word and it translates to sit still. Most of the poses we're not sitting. So it's dwelling, stillness in the mind, stillness in the body, observing without reactions, without attachments. And it's hard. It is not easy. Every single person I know comes up to me and says, I can't do yoga. I can't touch my toes. That is a reason to come in and do yoga and stretch. Or I can't meditate and do yoga because I can't quiet my mind. That is a reason to get on your mat and start to practice. Nobody just comes here and is just naturally still and quiet and their mind is just blank. Right? We live in a very overstimulated, overwhelming with information world. And it just is the way it is. And it's getting faster and faster and faster. So if we don't cultivate the skill of being able to slow down, of being able to be still and quiet and not run from that, because the first few times you do it, it's scary. Because we are taught to push away, suppress all of these feelings, experiences that are hard and that hurt us and that maybe traumatized us. And if we don't acknowledge them one day, and it does need to be the right time, you have to feel safe in the environment that you're at and safe within your own body to sometimes allow these things to surface. But I promise you this, the more you suppress, the more you ignore, the more you use substances and shopping and alcohol, cigarettes, weed, sex, whatever it is, the more you use those devices, the more this trauma and your past is going to relive over and over and over again until you give it permission to go. You've got to be able to release and let go, and you can't do that until you sit in the stillness and you move through the fire. So that's my vibe today. That's my Kula talk. I hope you enjoy it. And if you're interested in any sort of breath or any sort of tools, I have some free documents. Just comment breath in the... So that's my vibe today. Thank you for listening. Kula Talks. If you're interested in a simple breath guide just to help reset your nervous system, please comment breath and I will get it to you. Namaste. Thank you.